Cool.
Hello, everybody! It is my favorite time of the week. We get to talk with someone who's doing awesome stuff with hardware on Hackster Café. Usually we're on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. Today we're on Wednesday because we wanted to get James in here live. James Bruton
Hello.
is... Yes!
I'm here. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to chat with you. Good morning or evening.
Good late afternoon, yeah.
I came up with these things once,
Yeah.
like morphternoon and me-evening, where it
Oh,
was
yeah,
like
okay, yeah.
cross time zones. Anyway, so James is a very well-known YouTuber. You can find him at these places that I've also linked in the description below. He's on TikTok. You've also got a merch store with some cool robots on it and a Patreon, as well as GitHub, where people can find all kinds of cool projects that you've built. So James, how you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Yeah, I'm not that big on TikTok. I haven't really got along with it, actually. I'm probably, well, obviously YouTube, but then Instagram's probably the next biggest thing. And then
Which
Twitter.
one do you like the most? Where should people find you?
Well, like YouTube pay me. But yeah, YouTube mainly. That's where most of my content goes. But if you haven't got time to watch the videos, then there's cut downs on Instagram and Twitter that go out. Although you might get half the video and then a few days later another half, but not all of it actually a cut down without me speaking and just music for people who have their phones on mute. Yeah.
That is something that I struggle with, is editing. But yeah, tell us about... Well, okay, so first up, there is a very obvious one that you have on your shirt here. Could you tell us a little bit about your yellow robot friend?
Yellow robot friend. So, well, I can tell you all about. So basically, I've made about 7 robot dogs in total. This is the latest one, which is Open Dog 3, and Open Dog 2 is lurking down here somewhere. And then this is one of the mini dogs, and there's another orange mini dog. I don't think it's in shot, but it's right at the back. So basically, I made a robot dog, which was Open Dog 1. I didn't know it was 1 at the time, obviously, like Superman 1. It's just called Superman, which was very heavy and it's bulky, and it used used ball screws, basically, and big brushless motors. And I learned a lot about inverse kinematics, but it wasn't very dynamic. So I did some other tests with test legs and 2 other test dogs. And I thought, before I build another big robot dog with lots of brushless motors and expensive controllers, I'll see if I can actually make a robot dog walk first. Can I actually make something? So I made a smaller, cheaper one, and the first one was Mini Dog 1, which again, didn't know it was the first one. And it had this, I don't know if you can see on this t-shirt, it's got like, the legs go like this, basically. So that was kind of okay. But then I went on and did the second one, which is orange, which I've also got a t-shirt for. You might just see some orange back there. That walked quite well, and it was quite dynamic. It had an inertial measurement unit in it that altered its legs back to front, so it would balance on 2 diagonal legs. It actually worked quite well and took diagonal legs off the ground. And then I went on and built Open Dog 2, which was even more dynamic. So that was back drivable. Used 5-to-1 belt reductions from brushless motors with O drives. So the legs were quite springy, even though there's no springs in them, because the motor holding power and the back drivability of a 5-to-1 reduction meant that you could push that joint somewhere, and then the encoder and the motor and the O drive would try and apply more current to push it back. So what you got was basically a virtual spring, depending on how those motor controllers were tuned. So it basically smashed its legs into the ground really quick. It's like jumping on 4 pogo sticks at once. And that's how it worked. And then we moved on to Open Dog 3, which I decided I need more than a 5-to-1 belt reduction, because Open Dog 2 smelt of burning enamel from the motors after a few minutes of use. So I developed this cycloidal drive, which I can probably get to the camera with. Here we go. This is my demo unit with the top open, so it's like a wobble. It's 2 cycloidal discs. So I didn't invent the cycloidal drive, but I developed this one to be 3D printable. There's lots of bearings in it. The whole thing can be made in PLA, and that's all open source, published as part of the whole dog project, which is entirely open source. All of that's on GitHub, and it's a solid model as well, not STLs. So if you want your cycloidal drive for a project of your own, you can go and cut the cycloidal drives out in CAD. It's all step files, and there you go. So that's the brief summary of what's on my t-shirt.
Excellent. There's so many different versions of the Open Dog that you've done.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig into some of the differences there, but also, so materials wise, there's lots of different things you've got to take into account. Heat factors, you've got to take into account, for example, how the traction on the feet. How do you choose the materials that you're building with?
Oh, a lot of trial and error. So I actually had aluminium plates in Open Dog 2. because the motors got so hot. The 3 is all PLA though, so basically the motors are just they're powerful motors, but not driven up to the limit, so they don't get hot. And with the 10-to-1 reduction, it's fine. So that was just a sort of experience thing, and just limiting all the axes to 20 amps or something. So basically 6S LiPo, 24 volts or whatever at 20 amps, which I think is they'll run up to 12S. So if you halve the current, or if you halve the voltage, you only drive half the current, and that's a quarter of the power. So they're actually running on a quarter of the power they could do, so they don't get hot.
This is something,
and hence it can all be printed in PLA pretty much, apart from metal bearings and bolts and things like that. The feet you mentioned, these ones are silicon. The previous ones are NinjaFlex. This one moves a lot quicker because it's heavier, and I found that the NinjaFlex slipped on the kitchen tiles, so I did silicon casts in some platinum cure, quite soft silicon. So they've got 3D printed cores and a carbon fiber tube, and that's basically. So I made a negative mold that was 3D printed and cast silicon into it with a core inserted.
Haha. So I'm sure that you get this question all the time, but have you thought about making one that you can ride on?
Yes. So the projects I put out this week, which is here, the AT-AT, which is kinematically a lot simpler. Let's just move this funny wheel out of the way. So yeah, I haven't got anywhere to put this for all the cables. Hang on. So this is just using servos, and they're geared down. There's an interesting mechanism in the leg where the gear is built into these parallelogram legs. And so that one, because of the big toes on an AT-AT, it doesn't actually lean sideways as it walks, and they don't in the movie anyway. So that's much simpler because statically stable. So the dog feet are like ball feet, so it has the bit of balance on 2 legs at a time, which basically it does by moving very quickly and dynamically and absorbing the load. This one's totally rigid, so it doesn't have to do that. It can take 1 foot off the ground and move it around, and there's no problems with it falling over. So yeah, if I was going to make something big enough to ride on, then it would probably be that sort of structure, probably with even bigger feet. You probably need some ground sensing though. It's fine on flat ground, but if you were going to walk over lumps, then you'd have some problems with it pushing the whole thing over. So you'd need to have some sort of foot sensors and some sort of dynamic thing to level the body out as it goes, working out what the pressure is on each foot or something like that. It depends how big you go, really. But yeah, essentially it's statically stable. So it would be a bit like the Mantis robot, Matt Denton's hydraulic hexapod, but with 4 legs, I guess. But probably I wouldn't go the hydraulic route because that's a whole other thing.
So we do have that pulled up on the screen here. Check out the Building It Better, the Star Wars AT-AT toy. I can't help but notice that you brought this up in response to a question of whether you wanted to build an open dog that you can ride on. Is this a hint about where this project is going?
I'd love it to go there. I mean, yeah, everyone since I started doing robot dogs said, make one to ride on. People say that about everything.
It's true.
So, yeah.
Well, I kind of do the opposite. I like make ones that ride on me. So, but it's got to be one or the other, right?
So a good example is the ball-wheeled robot, which is over here. Let me just get rid of whatever we're calling that monstrosity. So the ball-wheeled robot it's omnidirectional. So these balls act like omni wheels. So essentially they're driven in one axis and then they're passive in the other axis because the hemispheres just spin round. So I did this in May 20 or 21, I think. Yep. And then all the comments said, make one you can ride on. So in summer 2022, I made one I could ride on. Yes. And I took it to EMF camp and rode around on it. So, yeah.
I'm so sad that I had to miss that 1 year. I'm trying to pull this one up from your channel, but for some reason I'm not finding it immediately. But we do have another ball-wheeled. Oh, no, it is the one I had up.
The big ball-wheeled vehicle.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So, ball-wheel omnidirectional vehicle testing. We'll just play a little clip of that because it's adorable.
Yeah, so this is actually shot at EMF camp. The start of this video, anyway.
Yeah. There we go. And what's the top speed of this bad boy?
Oh, I don't know, actually. It's not fast. I'm just trying to think, because on a smooth surface it's slightly quicker, but it's kind of juddery because you'll notice the balls. It's quite hard to make balls with a core in at that scale. So they're actually
Hmm.
CNC'd out of plywood, and they're like a lattice that's plugged together. So on grass it's a lot smoother, a smoother ride than it would be on a rigid surface. So, but I still don't know what the top speed is. Not very fast. It's probably, I don't know, 5 or 8 miles an hour or something like that.
Can it go fast enough to be scary? I guess it depends on the ground you're going over,
If
huh?
you spinning it round's quite scary. So yeah, that's what I do to people if I'm control. It's radio controlled, so if someone is riding on it and I'm driving it, then spinning around, because all the wheels go in the same direction and their legs go out usually.
So you've built a lot of your own devices from scratch, and I'm also curious because you've also hacked other devices like this Tickle Me Elmo robot conversion,
He's
and
somewhere at the back there. Yeah. Should we have a look at it? Hang on, wait.
ooh, yeah,
Can I reach for it?
I sprung this on you. I didn't mention beforehand that I was going to ask about this one, so
That's fine. But I've got like the things that are iconic. I tend to keep, but lots of things get broken down. So yeah, it's animatronic me Elmo. So he's got a skeleton inside him, and his arms move, and he walks along. So this was inspired by, you know, the film AI, Artificial Intelligence. It's a bit dusty
mm,
actually.
you have an
Um,
iconic scene from
with
there at the start here.
yeah, so the bear in that's the
Oh yeah.
AI bear from that. It was the thing with Jude Law in it and the kid out of Sixth Sense, whose name I've forgotten. So there was a robot bear, and there was about replicants or something. And anyway, they had this bear, and it was a thing that interacted with the kid, and it was a puppet. And someone was walking along behind, and they had like sticks on their feet to move its feet, and all the puppeteering stuff to move this bear around. And they had some animatronic arms and things in it, I think. Anyway, so I thought I'd do that. So basically, I've got this motion control rig on the back of Elmo, and his feet are on a thing that makes him walk along, and he can look around, and it's radio controlled, and his arms move out. So yeah.
What about heat management with that type of robot? I know that that you're sort of locating most of the electronics outside of the robot itself, and so that sort of
hmm
maybe avoids some of the issues.
I don't think there's much that gets hot. The servo is servos really. So yeah, there's some servos that are sort of in the back here. What do they do? Oh yeah, so one turns his head. Hang on, let's put him down. One of these turns his head, and the other one turns his whole body. There we go. But then he's still got one in his head for his mouth. But they don't. They're only like, RC servos. They're not really under much load, so there's not really a things shouldn't get that hot. Hopefully.
Mm. Do you prefer replacing everything or trying to repurpose what's inside? Does it depend on the project?
This was a Tickle Me Elmo that had one of
Right.
those laughing boxes in it. I think the
So
UK version doesn't have any. Is there one that its arms move or something in the
oh, you're
US?
right. I guess they
The
weren't
UK
robotic to
one.
start with. For some reason,
No,
I had in
there
my
is
head that they
one that
were.
does something like that, but this one was just a box, and the rest was stuffing. So
I might be confusing it with, like, Teddy Ruxpin or something.
maybe there was also Winnie the Pooh character. What's the no, I've completely forgotten what I'm talking about. There's one that jumped up and down, the kangaroo. That is that Winnie the Pooh? I don't know.
There's Tigger and there's Kanga
Oh, it's
and Roo.
Tigger. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Oh no, is
That
there a
would be a
kangaroo?
challenging.
Oh, anyway,
You know
there was a
what?
toy that it jumped up and down like the kangaroo, right? Is that from Winnie the Pooh? That seems a bit exotic.
I remember there
Well, I
being a
can't remember I don't
dinosaur,
know what I'm
but
talking about now. But anyway,
well, I'm certainly no expert, but, okay, first, before we move on, I have to say that it would be kind of epic if you built okay, I'm sure you get this all the time, but if you built a Tigger robot, it seems to bring together the best of your, like, springiness from your open
oh,
dog
okay.
and all the self-balancing stuff that you've done, like a pogo stick robot. But anyway, speaking of toys, though, you did actually do a stint before you became a YouTuber, or did this overlap with the start of your
Um,
YouTube?
yeah. So there's a
Yeah.
story. Do you want to hear my life story? So,
Sure.
so I worked in IT since I left university, basically. So, but for about 10 years, I had this job, which was I actually worked for Aon Corporation, the biggest insurance company in the world, AON, Manchester United sponsor. Um,
Mm.
so I did like product architecture and stuff in the IT department. So I did that job from about 2005 to 2015, something like that. In that time, basically, YouTube came along. 3D printing became more accessible with RepRap and everything. Things like Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, basically all the maker stuff came along. a lot bigger than it was, prior to that. And Chinese sellers on eBay and being able to get cheap stuff that you couldn't really get. I think eBay was around, but stuff wasn't as accessible as it is now. So I had this job for 10 years, and I started doing YouTube in about 2007, and putting stuff up. I did serious videos for 10 years, really, pretty much up to last year. Weekly videos, in fact. Anyway, at the end of that job, I left because the toy company found my YouTube channel and recruited me to go and do prototyping. And they found I was working on a Star Wars droid at the time, the R6 droid, that was all sort of see-through, and you could see all the mechanisms and had all the features that worked and everything like that. So they were a Disney license holder, so they wanted me to go down there and do working on Star Wars tech toys, basically. So that's how I got that job. But it's pretty much carrying on. They just wanted someone to do prototyping so we could show stuff to license holders like Disney, and also to factories to explain what we wanted.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, and that was Blades Toys in Portsmouth in the UK, which is something like 28% owned by a guy called Peter Jones, and he's one of these TV millionaires. So he does a TV program called Dragon's Den, which is like Shark Tank in the US.
Right. Is there anything that you can... I know that you mentioned that perhaps the things that you've worked on may have been discontinued by now, but I'm really curious, like, what types of things might you have worked on here?
I can't tell you about any of the Star Wars prototype stuff that I made. It was around the time Episode 7 came out. But I did work on some Hot Wheels stuff, so Hot Wheels drone racers. What else can I say? Not a lot, actually. Most of the stuff didn't see the light of day, let's put it that way, but it's still somewhere there on a shelf, so...
That must be frustrating, not being able to create any public-facing, like, share anything that you're doing and having the thing not come out into as a toy in the end. Although, I've never personally worked as a contract engineer, but I've heard this experience from a bunch of my friends. I'm curious how you, like... Does having your own YouTube channel help with that, or...?
Well, it's completely the opposite, I suppose, because everything I do is public.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I get a lot of comments like, have you tried this? Or have you ever made a... Basically, if it's not on YouTube, I haven't. Everything goes out and everything's open source where it can be.
I guess I meant in terms of the work stuff that you did, I assume you were doing the YouTube channel at the same time as this job.
Mm-hmm.
And does it help as a kind of like therapy or something to be able to be more open with that stuff, or is it just
I don't know. No, I mean the toy job was all right, doing whatever it was we had to do, but I guess they were kind of separated. But yeah, I was still doing weekly videos at that point. It's when I built some of my BB-8 droids and other stuff like that. So
yes.
Oh, and I also built a giant Hot Wheels car, which we drove through central London at the Hamleys Parade, which is Hamleys is a big toy shop in the UK.
Oh, that's
so we had like 60,000 people. It's like the Macy's Christmas parade, but a giant Hot Wheels car, which had massive rotors on the top.
When you're building things like this, what are your favorite tools to work with?
3D printers. Thanks to Lolspot 3D printers for supporting the channel, and 3D Fuel for the filament. Yeah, I use a lot of 3D printing. Sort of my go-to. So I'll start with, can it be 3D printed? If it can, it will be. And then also have a CNC machine, one of the Avid CNC machines that I do for things that need to be cut out of wood. So some of the basically those big ball wheels, they were CNC'd out on that. So, and yeah, Lincoln Electric sponsor my welding gear. So if I need to make steel things, again, that ball-wheeled vehicle had a big steel, these weird triangle chassis points that come out from a triangle in the middle because everything's 120 degrees apart. So all that stuff is welded steel if it needs to be really strong.
And you were doing some welding in this other Omnivol video, or not Omnivol, Omni-wheel bicycle video as well.
Yeah.
When you need to learn something like that, where do you pick it up? Because it seemed like you were still sort of in part of the learning process with this.
Yeah, so basically I went to Lincoln Electric in Sheffield in England when they gave me my welder, and I did sort of a half day having a go at welding and them showing me what to do, and that was about it. So I did use it in some other projects, but then I didn't have anywhere to do it really apart from my garden shed. So when I started the Omni-wheel bike project, I just got my new workshop. At least it was a temporary workshop before I got the proper place that I've got now, where I do all those big projects. So I hadn't actually done any welding for a while, so I was a bit rusty. But yeah, I think every weld I do gets better, but it depends how long the gap is between the welds. So
well, that's how you get that reinforcement learning over time. What do they call it? Spaced repetition.
Yeah, just
Well,
experience, I think.
I wish that more tool manufacturers would give live classes on the stuff that they sell. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was especially for me. I guess they didn't want me
Ah,
to turn up, have a video with a TIG welder and not know anything about what I'm doing. So,
that
yeah.
makes sense. What kind of a tool would you be most excited to work with next? Anything that you haven't used, but you would be excited to add to your
Oh,
workshop?
yeah, I can get away with most things. 3D printing's stronger than you think. So if there's a really complicated part with complicated geometry, I'd sooner 3D print it than CNC it. So I haven't come across anything yet. So I don't have a lathe, for instance, and I've not really found anything that I could need to make on a lathe that I can't just 3D print. So yeah.
You
So
don't have
even in
any, like
bigger vehicles and things. So I did a bike that was a 1,000-watt e-bike on the front and a caster wheel on the back a couple of about 4 weeks ago now. So the main steering column is 3D printed, and then it's got metal tubes inserted into it to make the basically the deck for the rest of the scooter. And the tubes actually broke, and the 3D print was fine. So
Wow, no way.
yeah,
I'm trying to pull these up as we talk about them. There's so much to dig through on your channel. It's like,
there are around 600 videos. So yeah, so there's almost too many projects to feature. I've got a lot of the stuff here. Most of the projects, though, they get broken down unless it's something that's interesting that I want to keep.
Mm.
So, and then I just reuse all the motors. And then there's a guy called Handy Dan's 3D Prints, who's actually one of the testers for Open Bionics. He's a prosthetic hand user, and he's got a business where he mashes up all my PLA, and then he mashes it and melts it and turns it into flower pots and sells it on the market.
Awesome! I've been thinking a
So,
lot about, recycling plastic because,
mhm.
I've definitely seen this, and it reminds me of a game that I can't remember what it was, and it's driving me bananas,
What
but,
are you looking at?
there is this,
Oh, right.
box that he made for SD cards, and I
Yeah,
swear
okay.
I know this game, but I can't think of what it is.
Yeah, he does 3D printing as well. But yeah, on his Twitter, there's a video of him mashing up some of my old prints in a big, one of those machines.
Love those things. That might be one that I would get just so that I can watch it go around all day. Um,
Yeah, well, I guess so. You might get bored of it. I don't know.
I
Depends
don't know.
what stuff have you got to mash up?
Well, lots of
What
PLA,
are you going to
but
put in there?
maybe not
Oh, okay.
that much. Let's see. Mm. So you mentioned Matt Denton's Rideable Mantis robot earlier,
Yep.
and that is a classic that we love. But also, are there any other projects that you look at them and you get excited about them, or other ones that when you were getting started out, you were inspired by?
That's a tricky one. I guess everyone watched Colin Furze,
Yeah.
but I think back when I was getting started, he was doing things like the Wall of Death and all sorts of things with the biggest Guinness World Record for the biggest bonfire, things like that. So he's actually progressed as I've progressed quite a lot by getting more and more tools and doing things. So it's kind of hard to think back, what projects I idolized really. And also a lot of YouTubers then, I can't remember who they are, but things I used to watch, they don't make videos anymore or whatever. So it's difficult. I think the whole thing's, quite progressive really.
If
But
you
yeah,
were gonna go
I can't think of a specific one.
legit, uh, what about when you were a kid?
Well, there was no internet then, so you
Oh, I don't
basically
necessarily mean like YouTubers. I guess like
yeah,
one
there
of
was
my major aesthetic influences was like this game Starship Titanic, which I think
okay.
got me into Art Deco and just like really influenced my aesthetic sense as a grown up. And I'm curious what sort of goes into yours.
Yeah, I think books like Heath Robinson cartoons, where everything's lashed up in a weird way, that was quite interesting. There's a thing called Secret Life of Machines that was on TV,
Mm.
and it was a guy who explained, automatons and how fax machines works and all those sorts of things. But that's pretty much your only way to be famous for that sort of thing was be on TV, and that's it, or have a book in those days. So yeah, again, things are quite progressive. It's really interesting how things have moved on with self-publishing and YouTube. I don't know. So I mentioned Blaze Toys and the Peter Jones and everything. So that wasn't actually one of his Dragon's Den, Shark Tank investments. He did another TV series called Tycoon. The viewing on it is really poor. It was something like each episode only had 1 million views on TV. And some of my YouTube videos have had more than that. So
Hmm.
everything in perspective, I guess. It's quite interesting how things have changed.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it, and I'm coming up with these, like, in Miami, a young woman suffers from, what's going on here? Gets a strange offer from a young real estate mogul, and it's like, mm, hard
Yeah,
to
it
come
was
up
back
with
in
stuff as the last
2007, that one.
icon.
2007 in the UK. So yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to find any trace of it now, but
Well, if we have any Tycoon fans, drop a, comment in
most
the
people
chat.
never heard of it. So
Legit. So you put a bunch of your stuff on GitHub, and also, as you're mentioning, YouTube is kind of the new, uh well, obviously there's still TV shows around this kind of stuff, but like on YouTube, it's a lot more open for anyone to get involved in this kind of stuff. And for people who do want to, what do you recommend for people who are trying to document their things well? So we care a lot about open source. Our website is a documentation website, basically, where people share their tutorials.
mhm.
And we're always trying to like help people figure out how to make documentation more painless and how to make
Yeah.
it easier for people to understand and actually use. I was wondering if you have any tips around that.
Yeah, so my documentation's pretty bad. What you get on GitHub is the CAD and some code and nothing else. No diagrams, nothing. No wiring diagrams. Basically, you get the video though. So, I'm not necessarily publishing these things so people recreate them. A couple of people are building OpenDog 3 from a couple of patrons and some other people in my Discord, but it's not a tutorial. But if you find it useful, then great. So I guess I'm not that good at documentation in that respect. But I mean, the video, I guess, explaining how it works is part documentation, but it's also mostly entertainment, I think.
This
So
explains one
yeah,
of the mysteries of James, which is like how you find the time for all of this. I know that it's your full-time job, but
yeah,
also
sure.
like there's all this production overhead and clerical overhead that goes into something like this.
Yeah, so I kind of film as I go. So I, make a few things and then make a few bits of it, print the parts, try it, film a few bits by editing as I go. So by the time I finish a project, most of the whole edit's done already.
Mm.
Um, and that's really useful because, like, I don't know, something like this that's got multiple parts fitted together and it's got gears and it's got. So basically, this is an omni wheel where you turn one side and all the little wheels turn.
Ooh.
But basically, there's so much to putting it together. There's multiple layers here in different colors and different gears that have to mesh and belts and idlers and things. If I filmed all of it and then filmed it as I went, then went to edit it and one shot is out of focus or something else, then I have to take it all to pieces and go back and reshoot that
Ugh.
piece. So generally, I don't pass the point of no return, or at least something that I check that I've done the thing and the shot's good before I go and screw the next piece on, or if I have to glue something, even more so. Um, so I think it would be a nightmare having someone else edit the videos because they find problems like that unless I reviewed every
Mhm.
piece of footage. So from a production point of view, I do it as I go, and that's the only way I'm really comfortable doing it. And then, yeah, I mean, there's accounts and bookkeeping and that sort of thing. So it is
It's sort of a
my job, and it's a limited company. So yeah,
it seems like you have a sort of photo twice cut once approach. Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
when you are managing your own project, I had to do it. When you're managing your own projects, are there like specific tools that you use to keep organized? Do you just have a bunch of like nested directories on your computer like I do, which is
Oh,
a mess? Or
so I use Trello,
yeah,
which is like a virtual card system where you can drag cards around.
love
So
Trello.
I use that for categorizing video ideas, and also I have a calendar sort of laid out where each column is the month, and then the weeks are individual cards. And then I can put in which videos I'm doing. I'm only doing every 2 weeks now, but I was doing weekly videos, so I had to stack them up. I have an agent who deals with the ad spots where you see me advertising Raid Shadow Legends or Huel or something like that. So they also have access to that calendar, so they can line up which ad spot is going in and deal with the contracts. So that's the main coordination. And then when an ad spot is done, it gets dragged onto like the done column until it's paid, and so on. And then there's a whole mass of columns on one side, which is just like vehicle ideas, feasible robotics ideas, collaboration ideas, things. So I've got another sort of tab now or column, which is background projects that need working on. So some projects are too big to be done in 2 weeks, so I never
Hmm.
start them. So I've started thinking, can I, print one piece for this every day and then do it in the background while I'm making the two weekly projects, and then I'll have all those parts made or whatever it is, and then I'll put that out when it's ready, kind of thing. So that's all organized in there as well with like different colors for with the stage of progress, whether parts have arrived,
Mm.
whatever it is. So yeah, I use that quite a lot.
The having the way that machines, like especially 3D printers and stuff, can run in the background, I feel like is part
Hmm.
of the magic of being a maker now, is that like I can I always feel automatically productive. I can sit around all day and still feel productive if like my 3D printer is going with something that's moving a project
Yeah.
forward. I try not to, but it's like a mental thing for me. And also like it's amazing that I can be like working on one thing and my little robot friend is happily working away on another part of another project.
Yes. So it
So
helps when you have more printers. So thanks to Lolsbot, I have 10, I think, in my 3D printing room and 3 spares,
dang. Oh
and
yeah,
they're
you gotta have
working.
spares.
All of them are working most of the time. So
Well, the cool thing about Lulzbot is that you can print the parts for the printer on another printer, right?
absolutely, yeah. I don't have to do that very often these days. I mean, the thing in the olden days, the extruder block was 3D printed. It's like the Greg's Wade extruder, so the idlers broke eventually. But
Mm.
they're all now they're E3D and or Bondtech or Slice Engineering or whatever. So they're proper metal extruders now. So nothing really goes wrong. There's lots of 3D printed parts still, like the ends for what was lead screws. Now they're belts on Z, but all of the complicated geometry parts. Those are all 3D printed still, but those don't really break, so I haven't had to do any repairs for a while.
Solid. Okay, so you mentioned that you have a tab of feasible robot ideas. What about unfeasible robot ideas? Do you ever have those?
Oh, I've got loads. Yeah, shall we have a look? I'm not going to share
Yes.
my screen, but I'm going to look. I'll just quickly look at this and see what I've got. I've got all sorts of. Let's just think. What I can tell you about that no one will steal. I'll tell you a feasible idea that I'm doing, which is I built a crash test dummy a few weeks ago. So I'm going to be doing a human egg drop challenge with another channel where we drop it off a crane and we have to build something to protect it. It's got accelerometers and things, and its face is made of Lego. So if its Lego breaks, your face would have broken.
Mm.
Um, Let me just find something that's ridiculous that I've got on here. Like they're not all necessarily ridiculous. They're things that I've got like a bike made from ice. Colin first did a bike with ice wheels, but let's make all of it from ice, and it wouldn't need bearings because
Wow.
ice is slippery. Um,
I do love with
some of
your
these are
crash
actually not
testing.
that ridiculous. Oh, the rolling down the hill cheat device, which is like a barrel that you roll down a hill in, and it doesn't let you roll too fast, and it charges your phone.
Ah! I love
Is
that.
that that's probably feasible though? A large ride-on worm.
It always comes
Uh,
back to rideable robots, doesn't it?
yeah. Well, also this is my column of larger vehicle product. I like looking. Are any of these exciting? Oh yeah, elastic band powered human lifting drone. That's infeasible ideas. Anyway, you get the idea. Um, let's see. Yeah. Anyway, we can move on if you like. There's quite a lot here. Oh yeah. So one other idea I really like to do that probably is feasible, but I don't know if it'll work. So you've probably seen people make like a little hovercraft with a leaf blower and a bit of wood and
Mm-hmm.
then a skirt on it. And this video Mr. Beast did ages ago, I was going to if I did this, I was going to have like fixing Mr. Beast's biggest mistake. So
Mm.
the video was called "Can I Fly on Leaf Blowers?" and he had probably 100 leaf blowers in a 10 by 10 grid, all pointing upwards, and then he's going to try and fly on it, which of course doesn't work because you're only going to get maybe 3 or 4 leaf blowers lifting you at a time, which isn't enough air. But what about air hockey, where you've got holes in the table and air comes up and then you float a
Yeah.
puck on it? What about if it was a hoverboard, but it was like a giant air hockey table?
Wow, that would be an
So
amazing.
it's like it's the upside down of the leaf blower hovercraft, kind
I
of.
really want that to be a sport. That sounds like an amazing sport. You'd need to have like a whole like air hockey rink and like have people. Ah, I would play it. Need
But
lots
you
of
need a lot of air from somewhere.
and a lot of protective equipment. Maybe some jet
Mm.
engines. You have been working on this better Doc Ock tentacle, which is behind you on here as well. Which this seems like something that if you're planning on making it into a whole backpack, it seems like a bit of a challenge.
I think I'd probably just make one bigger one that's floor standing. So basically, yeah, it's 3 Stuart platforms stacked on top of each other, and a Stuart platform has 6 degrees of freedom, so it goes up and down, and it can move around, and it can uh, roll and pan and yaw. So yeah, so it's just 3 of those, but it was actually a really interesting result to see 3 of them using both the translation and rotation axis to move around. And standing here, it goes out shot basically. So the plan was to build a 6-stage one, but obviously the bottom stage is going to have that whole load of the whole thing leaning over on it.
Mhm.
So the plan will probably be to use sort of brushless motors and ball screws on maybe the first 2 stages, then like a couple of stages of lead screws and motors, and then maybe servos like that one on the top 2 stages, and get the thing to be 6 to 8 feet and anchored to a big steel frame. And then it could be
Yeah.
an interactive exhibit for events where people can, use like a 6-axis joystick or 6-axis controller, like I use for the robot dogs, where the joysticks rotate as well to give
Mm.
you 6 axis, and they could sit there and drive the thing around with a controller. But yeah, there's lots of big projects like that I'd like to do.
Is there are there new advances that you see coming out that will enable some of these projects, or other ones that you're that maybe the technology doesn't exist for yet? I know that it's hard
Um,
to necessarily ideate in that circumstance, but I'm thinking of like stuff that's being built in space, for example, so you don't have the constraints of
oh, okay.
gravity and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, like all these things will work better in space because there'd be no, they would just float there, and you could use any tiny motors, and it'd probably all be fine. But no, I mean, so I think brushless motors are, there's some brushless motors now. So all of these are brushless drone motors, the sort of pancake motors, and then they've got an encoder on the back, and then in the middle of OpenDog is the O drives which control them. So there are now, geared brushless motors that have the controller built in, so you just feed CAN bus data and power to it instead of having all of this stuff. There is in fact an O drive now that would have fitted on the back where that encoder is as well, if you want to homebrew one. And there are some brushless motors now that it's a brushless motor with a Hall effect sensor and the controller built into it, like tiny little things for
Ooh.
little droids and things like that. So yeah, I mean, before it just means having big external controllers. Things are getting a lot more compact in that sense. But I'm
Hmm.
not aware of any sort of space stuff, I think, that would help me that much.
Okay, noted. Don't necessarily put James in space. Okay,
I'll
so
go. I mean, yeah.
would you go to
So I'll go.
Mars?
I'll go to space. How long does it take to get to Mars?
Yeah, that's the
So
question.
that's the thing, isn't it? I don't think. Is it that you can't come back?
It might still be the case that you can't come
Can you
back from
imagine a
that.
colony that I seed? Anyway, a new colony of humans.
Well, I mean, you're very used to working with robots, so maybe it would be ideal.
Okay, I'll
Send
wait for them to call me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll let them know. Speaking
Okay.
of speaking of droids, and for example, you mentioned the BB-8 that you built earlier.
Mhm.
You've built a ton of different self-balancing items, to the point where when you were building something with Colin for he sent you this bike. In one of your
Oh
recent
yeah,
videos, you were modifying his bike, and you were like, "I hope this isn't his like childhood bike or whatever." But
yeah.
he asked you if it was going to be self-balancing, the thing that you built with it, because you've got such
Mhm.
a history of doing these things. And I'm curious, I haven't gotten a chance to explore most of your videos. Are there various different types of self-balancing tech that you work with, like different techniques of
Yeah.
doing it?
Yes. So I got a bit obsessed with one wheel balancing robots. So I did about 3. Let me just think. Well, let's go through them. So I started actually with a physical spinning gyroscope. So a physical spinning gyroscope, if you try and tilt it, it makes a force in a perpendicular axis.
Right.
So you can use one as the control axis with a servo, and then it'll cause a force in the other axis. So if you measure the other axis with an inertial measurement unit and use a PID controller to move the gyroscope that's physically spinning in its control axis, then you can counteract the falling over axis basically. So there's a thing called the Seakeeper you put in boats to stop boats rolling. It's exactly the same.
Huh.
So first of all, I made this gyroscope that balanced on a single edge, and then I went on and made a two-wheel inline balancing robot like a bike that had 2 gyroscopes, in fact, that rotated in opposite directions and moved in their control axis in opposite directions in response to falling over this way. And that caused an opposite force that held it stable. And the logical answer was then to go on and make a one-wheel balancing robot, which used that same method, but then it balanced front to back like a hoverboard or a Segway. So actually driving to catch itself, but it balanced side to side with the gyroscopes. So that was 3 videos. There were weekly videos. Reaction wheels, which are not a constantly spinning mass, but they spin in opposite directions
Right.
about a center point, and the reaction pushes the thing the other way. And then again, measuring the angle and making that reaction wheel react will make something stand up. So I then went on, did a one-wheel balancing robot that used a reaction wheel side to side and balanced forward to back by driving.
Is this also the basis for your tightrope balancing cheat device?
That's right. That was the one that I could wear that helped me balance on a bar, sort of. So yeah, that's a reaction wheel.
Here's the earlier one.
And then I went on. Are we? Sorry, have you got a? I'm not really looking at the screen.
There we go. I'm just playing a little clip from your tightrope walking device.
Yeah, I'm just checking that out. So that's a reaction wheel. So it spins it as it spins. It forces you to move the other way, basically. So yeah. If you you could skip to the end for the demo, but yeah, you can check that one out. And I managed to balance on a bar where I couldn't before. Although by the end of the video, I probably could have, having tuned it for so long. And then the next balancing on one wheel was this, which is a wheel that has two pulleys on, and when you drive in, normally it drives like a wheel. Let's bring this closer to the camera, and we see the wheels turning as I spin one side against the other. So that meant I could drive sideways as well as front to back. So then I made a balancing robot that balanced on this one wheel, driving in all directions. And I think that's all the one-wheel balancing robots. Yeah, but the Omni-wheel bike, of course, balances sideways like a Segway, but it's got an Omni-wheel on the front facing the wrong way to the rest of the bike, and then that you can still pedal forwards because it's got little wheels all around the outside.
You're really getting me excited to build something with Omni wheels. I usually build things that are more static, but it feels like the way to make wheels exciting, you know, because I feel like tank treads have a cool factor, and like stuff that walks around on legs has a real cool factor. But
so I did an Omni wheel tank as well, which I've got here, which is a triangle tank. So the treads have little wheels all around the edges, so they can slide sideways, and then it works like an Omni wheel vehicle with the three Omni wheels at 120 degrees.
And you have another video on how to make a track bend to steer.
Yeah, that's actually the other end of the room, but I won't grab it for now. That's probably version 1, but yeah, it's a single tank track, but it bends in the middle so that it can, you know, steer like that. I need to do a better version of that. It was inspired by sushi restaurants where the food comes around on a conveyor, but they go around corners.
So, we're coming back around to inspiration again, and for some reason, apparently, I have space on the brain. That's just how it is. If you were to build a sci-fi spaceship, what kind of, which of your things do you think you would use to build an accessory for that spaceship to make it really cool?
So wait, a real spaceship or a set?
Let's go with
or doesn't it
real
matter?
Spaceship, because people in real life need cool stuff too.
So I built a real. So wait, I've built the spaceship. And then what was the question? What would I put in it?
What is there something like? Would you make one with tentacles, for example? Because I've never seen a spaceship with tentacles, or you've got an EEG looking setup in the back there.
So wait, I'm riding in it, or is it a satellite launching? Is this total fiction? Like we've got a Millennium Falcon type of thing. We're flying through space with a hyperdrive, or are we talking about launching a CubeSat?
I think we're talking about a satellite that people live in, a spaceship that people live in, but also it's kind of a terrible question at this point. Is there something that you as an astronaut would like to make your experience more fun? I personally I might be riffing on this because I personally want to see companion bots in space, and that's kind of like a thing that I'm obsessed with. And so I'm like,
the first thing that came to mind when you said astronaut was some sort of fan thing to blow me along, so you can, you know, you see them in the space station pulling themselves along and everything. But if you had a much bigger expanse, you'd get stuck in the middle eventually, wouldn't you? What would happen? So you'd need like a jet suit, but you wouldn't need much. A few EDFs.
You know, are you planning on building a jetpack for real?
Some EDFs. Well, I have got this project that's so you know free skates. These are like roller skates, but it's just 2 wheels. Are you a skater? I thought I saw a skating thing on Instagram.
I have dabbled, but then I screwed up my knee, and unfortunately, I didn't get very good.
Anyway, so free skates is just 2 wheels you stand on here. There are straps, but you don't have them necessarily. There's one for each foot, obviously, so it's like a little 2-wheel skateboard. And then, so I was watching about like what can I do with free skates, and no one's done before. and I thought I'll put casters on them, but I found someone already did that. So like a ripstick is a skateboard with 2 caster wheels.
Ooh.
The same company made rip skates, which were 2 caster wheels on free skates. So it's like, oh, I can't do 2 casters. I was going to have 4, but then I thought someone's already done 2 casters and free skates. So what I decided that I'll do is the obvious. What would you click on? Would you click on 1 caster on a skate to see
I
if I could
would, just
write?
to see the crash
And would you
footage.
see
I
if
feel
it was
like
power? If each one had 2 massive EDF, well, relatively large, they're like 800-watt EDFs on it.
absolutely. I'm having trouble, like, not
So
cursing right now because of how much I would be excited to see that.
that's what I'm working on that now for a future video. If it never comes out, it's because I can't ride on it. But I think there's going to be a cheat device involved.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Are you planning on wearing lots of protective devices, hopefully?
we'll see how it goes.
Personal protective equipment?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
so right, free skates aren't fixed to your feet unless you really want them to be. This is going to have to be, I think, because otherwise the 1 caster's too sketchy. So we'll see.
Ah, so you can just jump off, perhaps?
No, you can't. That's the thing.
Oh, wait, so it's attached to your feet, but then also oh, man, I'm feeling like I've already crashed just thinking about this.
Yeah, it's a sketchy one, but we'll see what happens. There are parts printing now because obviously, like that's a piece of wood, right? It's got a wedge, so that it's like a ripstick where the caster is at 30 degrees back, so it tends to center. But there's more parts
Mm.
that are happening.
So, James, you're dropping lots of cool terms like inverse kinematics and whatnot, and I know a little
Yep.
bit about that from building like
Mm.
a tri-robot, a delta bot, basically,
Oh yeah,
and
yep.
the Spirit platforms, which is sort of like an inverse delta bot. But all of that is stuff that I sort of picked up over the internet and from friends because I wasn't formally trained. And I
Okay.
stalked you on LinkedIn, as I tend to do, and I
Hmm.
noticed that you said that you went to the University of Birmingham, but it
Yep.
doesn't say in what. And then
Oh,
later on, you
electronic
say that you work
engineering.
in. Oh, okay.
But it was in the 90s because I'm old, and
Mm.
so it was like 97 I finished. Anyway, um, but yeah, so we didn't really even do microcontrollers on that course. That was a degree course. We did programmable logic arrays, so we did Carnot maps, and we did
Ah,
Boolean algebra, but that was as programmable as it got. And we did ANSI C. So yeah, all of the stuff that I do pretty much now, anything inverse kinematics, I just worked out what to do pretty much. I
mm.
knew what it meant, and I worked out how to do it the way I could explain it, which isn't the best way
Ah,
probably, but it's a way I can explain it, and I understand it, and I can write the code. So yeah.
I will invent my own inverse kinematics. I love that. Are there any? Okay, so I'm not doing so hot with the abstract questions today, so we'll see how this one goes.
Okay.
Based on that experience, are there any weird EE concepts that you would love to explore in hardware that you haven't gotten a chance to do yet? Like weird stuff that happens with physics, weird stuff that happens when you do this thing with a transistor, or when you like, for example, like how you can blow up capacitors if you hook them up backwards in the
Oh,
wrong kind of
okay.
situations. Like I have wanted to build something with this. I had a whole project planned out and it didn't work out. But yeah,
Wait, that
other
deliberately blows up capacitors.
yes. Well,
Oh,
okay, so I was
okay.
playing around with EEG stuff and I was like, there I would do
Okay.
this men who stare at goats thing. I'd put a big capacitor in a pinata. I would blow it up with my mind basically by putting the voltage through it backwards and I was gonna see how
Oh,
that
okay.
worked. Yeah, so there's gotta be all kinds of like deeper stuff that you got into, or even like surface level EE concepts that you would like to explore or exploit in a project. And again, feel free to run whatever direction you feel like with
Um,
this because it's abstract.
yeah, so it depends. I find the videos that do the best are the sort of mechanical things, actually. So, like this wheel did really well. This wheel, which is the one I made before that, did even better. Did like 2 million views.
Hmm,
Um, so, and the Omni bike that did 3 million views, I think. The Omni wheel bike.
hmm,
Um, so I find if I get too in depth with code or I don't know principles, anything with AI on does really badly. So there's probably loads of things I'd like to explore in depth, but pretty much there I don't think the videos would do well. So I'm far better off making another funny wheel or
huh.
something, a cheap
Time
device for balancing
limitations
on a
are.
caster wheel. That's it's very difficult. Um, so like one project I did that I thought, so using Jetson, NVIDIA Jetson Nano. So they give you a whole thing that's really good for makers, which is, a deep learning model that's pre-trained that does 100 household objects. And they give you scripts and GUI tools to retrain it with transfer learning so you can get it to recognize your own objects. So I trained it to recognize my 2 facial expressions, my normal face and my Wolverine going like that face. And I made Wolverine claws that extended when it had a camera that poked out of my chest. And when I went like into the camera, the Wolverine claws popped out. And I thought
Amazing.
that would be YouTube gold, but it only did 40,000 views. And like no one knows why. I think it was some sponsor was going to sponsor me to do another AI thing, and they were like, "We really like that video, but why did it do so badly?" And I don't know. I still don't really know why. I think it's because it said AI operated Wolverine claws in the title.
It looks amazing. So, I'm pulling it up right now, and like I'm gonna go absolutely watch.
Skip to the end for the demo, but yeah,
we will do this.
That's pretty much it. Oh, that's the very end. That's the outro. Okay, not quite.
I can't
end.
help it. I see a cool waving robot, and I just get mesmerized.
That's the end. Still, go back to about I don't know, somewhere where you can see me in the room throwing. That's still the end, or something. I don't know. Further there.
We'll also link this in the description to the video. There we go. Wolverine face. How much did you have to practice that Wolverine face, or did you already have one that like was ready to go?
Yeah, no, I had to train the model, so I had to do it loads of times. So I was going to do it in different places in the house, but then I realized the camera just sees my face in the ceiling, so the background's always the same. So in the end, I didn't have to do many. It was pretty good at recognizing my face, actually. So yeah, I didn't have to do too many photos to train it.
I feel like I'm going wrong in life because I don't already have a Wolverine face that's like ready to go. Maybe I should come up with a different one. Is Wolverine maybe the superhero that you relate to the best, or is there anyone else that you feel like sort of?
Well, no. So where I got really started on YouTube was doing Iron Man cosplays.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the whole thing where most of my subscribers came from. So I did this. How much time do we have?
We can go about 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay. Well, here's a bedtime story for those of you in the appropriate time zone. So I started my whole YouTube channel pretty much started. There's some really early stuff of robots and things I built, and I put the videos up to post in forums. But pretty much when Iron Man came out, the movie in 2008, I started building an Iron Man suit, and this is before 3D. Most people had 3D printers, and before like Pepakura templates, which are the paper templates people print out and put together in fiberglass. Yes. So everything was hand sculpted in clay and molded and cast. And I attempted to build this Iron Man suit, and those early videos, in fact, I deleted because it wasn't very good at all. And there's copyright music on them, and things that we care about now that we didn't care about in 2008. Anyway, second Iron Man suit, I did a project, and I made one out of foam, and then I painted and sealed it. Then I molded it and made a rigid one, and then I made all of the mechanics. And I only got a 3D printer right at the end. But this is something I did in like 2009 to about 4 years, I think. And there were 50 videos in my channel, and most of them are still there. In 2014, I put together a video that I intended to be a viral video, which was compiling 50 videos and 4 years into a 4-minute cut of making this Iron Man suit. And you won't find it if you're looking for it. Anyway, so I put this video out. It did really well. It was sort of evergreen, where the video was getting still 5-6 years later, 500,000 to 1 million views a month, which no one's ever heard of before. So up to 2020, it was doing 500,000 views a month. It was on 70 or 80 million views. I did a collaboration with Mark Rober on his auto stroke bowling ball, and I asked him, like, have you ever had the video that's carried on 6 years later? And he just hadn't heard of anything like that. So some weird algorithm thing, the YouTube algorithm thing, had got hold of it, was still feeding it to people, and people were still watching it because the thumbnail was pretty good, and it was probably quite a good video. Anyway, in a single day, I think it was September 2020, it did a million views in a day and 9 million views in the month.
Dang.
So this sounds great, right? That you've got this video that's evergreen, that's bringing in ad revenue, and it's still doing great. By then, I was doing projects like this ROS robot in the corner. My videos were about how to work out wheel odometry and publish a ROS topic, and how to view it in RViz and look at laser scanner data. So the problem with YouTube is that if you watch a video from a channel, even if you don't subscribe, you get on a watch list for that channel, that you've watched that channel, and YouTube keeps feeding you more videos on the front page from that channel. So that's what you need when you get started, is to get on people's watch lists by
Mhm.
posting it somewhere else, and then your future videos will get fed to those people, and that's how you build a following. However, for me, it was really bad because all my current more serious robotics videos like this weren't quite as appealing to people. The millions of people who'd watched this Iron Man video and getting fed my current content,
Mhm.
funny wheels and Ros robots. So basically, all my click through was trash, which is how YouTube rates your videos. If people click on it, a high percentage, it thinks it's good, and if they watch a high percentage, it thinks it's good. Neither were true, because whoever was watching millions of views of an Iron Man cosplay viral video weren't watching Ros robots being built. So I basically deleted that. I deleted that and several other videos, marked them private, removed 100 million views off my public view count, and so that was about September, October 2020. And
Mm.
my views roughly on the videos were sort of 30,000-40,000 views. First video out 2021 was 500,000 views, and I haven't maintained that, but pretty much I'm doing more than 100k now. So that Tentacle did 400,000. The ATAT's done 100k in a day, basically.
Huh?
So,
I'm
if a
behind the
video's
tentacle
done
all
more
the
than
way.
200k, it's good. So, yeah, having some pop culture like Star Wars or Doctor Octopus in it helps. Tentacle
Yeah.
things do well for some reason, but anyway.
Well, they look awesome. I'm over here like tentacle, tentacle. Like I want to see more.
But yeah, I'm extremely cautious about
So
doing that,
tentacles
because
from that.
if the AT-AT isn't a replica of an AT-AT, the
Mm,
Tentacle isn't a replica of Doc Ock's Tentacle. It's a take on it with those keywords essentially for the
mm,
clicks. I'm not going to be dressing up as Iron Man again, because it will attract people who only want that type of content. It's
mm.
the curse of going viral.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Getting to still make the stuff that you want and not just serving the algorithm is like it sounds like you're figuring out how to make that work. So that like you're merging the stuff that you're really interested in doing with.
I'm not really good at finishing. I'm not Adam Savage, where he makes a beautiful prop out of the thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly a
Same.
mechanical 3D printed thing, and if people will watch that, then great.
Yeah, it seems like you're indulging your curiosity and sharing
Mhm.
that process with other people along the way, which I think is what a lot of us are here for. Uh, so
Sure.
we've got a few minutes left. I would love to ask you two questions about durability.
Okay.
The first one is about robot durability and how you make your robots stand up to all the stuff that you put them through. So, for example, when you build a three-ball wheel chair and you take it
Yep.
to uh, EMF camp, how do you keep it from breaking down immediately?
Build it well in the first place. That's
Yeah.
why some of it's steel and the wheels are wood, but only because I couldn't think of any other way to make them. But they've got really tough like edging on that's plastic with steel cleats inside it.
Mm.
So the pulleys and all the drivetrain is 3D printed pretty much. But yeah, it's stood up okay. I built the gearbox in it a couple of other times, so it's the same as the Omni wheel bike and the reaction wheel on my back. So that's the same gearing or belt arrangement with the same type of motors and everything. So that was already proven. So OpenDog's a good example. So the cycloidal drive. This is the version 2 because the first one broke.
Mhm.
It's full of metal and bearings and bolts going through the cams and things like that to strengthen the parts. And
Ah.
actually, the first prototype I made, I actually put a wheel on it and put it on the end of a stick, and then pushed myself on a skateboard with it for several miles to check that the discs wouldn't disintegrate. So there's a whole cycloidal drive like development, 2 videos or so, testing cycloidal drive and building it and seeing how much torque there is, how little backlash there is, and all that stuff, and then basically soak testing it by pushing me along for miles. Then I was like,
Oh.
right, now I can make 12 to put in here and they'll be okay, rather than all of them breaking.
So testing before you get out there and it breaks. That seems to be
Well,
a big part of the key.
yeah, I mean, so I generally over engineer because, if I make something and it breaks, so the 3D printed parts generally are big and chunky, and they're much chunkier than they need to be, so that I make sure they definitely are okay.
Same with your motors,
It's
like you
my
were
usual
mentioning,
way.
like, there's no way they're gonna overheat because 'cause you're driving them at a quarter of the power.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I already learned that lesson in OpenDog 2, which, yeah, smells of burning enamel wire, basically, when it's been running for too long.
Do you have, like, a mobile repair kit, that's sort of for obviously, it depends on the project, but, like, is there a standard sort of set of stuff that you'll bring out if you're going,
Um,
somewhere?
It depends where I'm going. So EMF
Hmm.
camp, yeah, I think I had a whole toolkit with me, but I didn't have any spares really worth speaking of. So I don't think I even had. There's a 2-stage belt reduction pulley in those gearboxes, which is 3D printed. It's got metal bearings in the end and a metal axle. But if any of those had broken or anything, that would have been it. So,
Hmm.
so Matt Denton had his giant Lego electric go-kart there, and he put more powerful motors in, and then the motors stripped the belts because they were so powerful, and he didn't
Oh,
have a
wow.
spare one, and he couldn't drive it because one wheel was spinning away.
Oh, no.
So,
Uh,
but then he found he did have a spare when he got home. In fact, he bought another one. And then when he got it and put it with his other belts, he's like, "Oh, there's already one here. I could have taken." But anyway, that's another story.
I'm really regretting missing this last one. I got to sit in the previous one, which wasn't actually sanctioned by him. I think he walked away from the Mantis robot, and someone else was there. And I was like,
That was
"Oh, what's
me.
this?" And they were
That,
like, "Oh,
that
you
was
should go."
me. That was
Oh,
me.
that was you.
I
It's
was helping you
your
out.
fault. It's your
Yeah.
fault. They so like
Didn't
later
I
on, I
take a
posted a
picture of you
picture.
in it with your own phone? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know him quite
Somehow I
well. He
didn't
lives
make
down.
that
He lives like 20
connection.
minutes walk away from me. Yeah.
I remembered meeting you and I remember that experience, but I did
Mm.
not put together the pieces that like wow. Okay, so
Yeah, so one thing that's happened is we did events prior to the pandemic. Hardly anyone knew
mhm,
who we are. Maybe 10% of people at, say, Maker Central, this big event happens in Birmingham every year. We've just had one. Um, the like 2018, 2019, 10% of people know who you are. And then after the pandemic, this year and last year, 10% of
mhm,
people don't know who you are. And he said the same thing, even though he hardly puts any videos out, because everyone's gone on YouTube in the pandemic, and now everyone knows who everyone is.
mm. So speaking of upcoming of events in general, you are going to be coming to San Francisco for Open Sauce in July. Are there other ones that you're excited to go to?
I haven't planned anything else yet. Yeah, open source. I need to apply for the visa waiver scheme still,
Ooh.
but hopefully it'll be fine. So I should be there. Uh, I think there's Maker Faire Hanover in Germany in August,
Mm.
which I might get to, but I haven't really made any plans yet.
Well, I'll cross
But
my
yeah,
fingers for
otherwise
you on the
we're
visa.
kind of short on events, which is really why open source is happening. So I don't know what it's like in the US, but I guess there's not really many Maker Fairs and things.
No, it feels like there's in the Bay Area, they're getting kind of replaced. So, for example, Bay Area Maker Faire used to be the big one. Last year,
Mm.
SillyCon was a sort of analog
Oh
to
yeah.
that. But now that's not happening this year, so I feel like Open Source is sort of the one. And then there's
Yeah.
SuperCon for Hackaday, which is
Oh
in
yes.
November.
I went to Berlin Hackaday Berlin.
Oh,
So yeah, that was this
yeah.
year.
So my final question about durability actually kind of relates to this.
Okay.
We talked about durability with robots, but there's also the durability of humans, and you know, running around doing projects, going to events and things. But then also the fact that this is your livelihood, and like you've mentioned, views can be fickle. You can't necessarily predict what's
Hmm.
going to go viral, and like you mentioned, also you have to be careful about what you share in case someone else like decides to take your idea and run with it before you have a chance to do it. Stuff like that. How do you sort of manage all of that? And do you have any special any advice for people who make stuff and just sticking with it and feeling good as a human being?
Yeah, I mean, so people don't. So what was so open source? We mentioned that they tweeted or put something on Instagram that I'm going to be there, and they sort of in the copy they alluded to how much content I produce. So yeah, people don't understand, well, they don't get how much or how I get the content made. I used to do weekly, so Make Essential. Lots of people are like, wow, I don't know how do you make weekly videos, but actually I haven't made weekly videos since last August,
Ugh.
and apparently no one's noticed. So yeah, I'd say be kind to yourself and don't thrash yourself, um, and yeah, planning. That's pretty much it. But
You
yeah,
seem
if
to have a
I
really solid process for that, and mine is spread across like 8 different notebooks at any given time. So maybe
okay.
trying to consolidate that is something I'm going to take away from this.
Yeah. So I think coming to San Francisco, I'm probably going to be there for about a week in total because I don't want to arrive the day before the event with the jet lag and everything. And I've got a couple of things to do in the week afterwards. So probably that week I will, instead of having 2 weeks of videos, I'll have 3 weeks unless I can make some shorter videos. But I'm not going to work through the night to get my 2 week schedule on there, even though there's a week missing. So yeah.
Yeah. We have this cute comment from Not Janet who says, "I'm still super awkward meeting people at events. Despite meeting him before, I was still super awkward last time I saw him. Handed
Oh,
over
hang on,
something I
wait.
wanted to give him,
It's not
then
Janet.
ran away."
Wait, here. Yeah, I've got it here.
Ah, there you go.
I haven't. It's a transformer. I haven't transformed it yet, but it's a obviously
What?
it's a TARDIS. Wait, I've got the instructions. I keep meaning to have a go, but it looks complicated. Wait, here we go.
This is so exciting. I have to
So
check that
yeah.
out. That looks amazing.
Anyway, that's not Janet.
So you don't have to be awkward.
Yeah.
It's really hard
It's
though. I
still
don't
in one
know.
piece as
People think
well.
it's hard.
That's the thing. The
Woo!
actually the lamp snapped off the top and I glued it back on. But there you go. That was in my bag from Maker Central. Good.
Well, well, we're about at time, and thank you so much for bearing with my weird abstract questions and, and running with
That's
them.
fine.
It's been a real pleasure to catch up with you. I can't wait to check out. I'm gonna dig into more of that tentacle stuff and watch out for more of it. I know that like I don't know, they're just cool, you know? Anyway, I can't wait to see the next the things that you put out in the future, and anyone who has a link to sending people to space, take note that James is down. All right, thanks again for joining us, and thank you
All
everyone for
right. No
watching
worries.
and chiming in.
Thanks. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And hack on.